Good evening again. President Lopez, Vice President Brownlee-Page, board members, and Dr. Miguel. Again, tonight we're going to bring you just some information about our reentry update, and you're going to be hearing from a variety of folks giving you some information on where we are and our next steps moving forward. So once the presentation is done, then we're going to take any questions that you may have. So we'll get through the whole presentation and then we'll take some questions from you all. So just a reminder, we are bringing students back in on February 22nd. However, based on feedback that we are receiving from our staff, our teachers, our principals, and just community members in general, we're hearing a lot of feedback around how this previous plan that we presented to you is causing some disruption in children's teacher who they would have if they were to come back in person, that they're also finding that this is really disrupting our teachers' rosters, and that if we were to come back in April, we may have students that have had up to 3 different teachers, and then teachers may have had up to 2 or 3 different classes. And so as not to make this as disruptive as that would have done, we are making an update. And so Dr. Miguel shared with you on Friday the guidance that we provided to some of our buildings. And so we wanted to make sure we highlighted what that means for everyone. So this new reentry plan, again, brings back kids on February 22nd. But instead of having those in-person teaching moments, kids will still be reporting to their online teacher, their remote teacher. So this is going to be a connectivity hub for our students that are unable to connect. However, we're still going to pay very close attention to those students that are in foster care, that are homeless, the newcomers, and then our students with disabilities. So we're putting a priority that they be focused on as we bring students in that are struggling with that connectivity. Again, we're going to work with our high school seniors and serve the seniors, again, who are in danger of not graduating on time. With this change, it doesn't require as much intense planning and preparation. So we're asking that essential staff who are identified to support this work will return on February 16th. And I'm going to just say, Dr. Miguel, I want to make sure that if you wanted to share anything, I open it up to you.
Say anything? I think, Matt, you captured the essence of what we planned. I want to highlight we are still bringing in the students who haven't connected or who have had a lot of challenges with connectivity. We're just highlighting some of the students that we're paying really close attention to because of their current situation. But we have stayed with the same group of kids, so they would still come in, they would still get assistance from an adult. But we realized we were going to cause, like Matt said, a lot more disruption than we intended, knowing also that a change would have to take place in April when we bring everyone back for hybrid. So trying to maintain the stability for students of their current schedules and the teacher that is currently teaching them.
Thank you, Dr. Miguel. Next, I'm going to have our instructional improvement officers for elementary schools, Mr. Terrence Sanders and Dr. Kimberly Shaw, share just a little bit about the next steps for our elementary schools.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Good evening, President Lopez, Vice President Page, our board, and Dr. Miguel. So I'll just briefly go over some of the items for the elementary schools. So our students will be able to attend a full day of school, and that will take place on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And during the time that our students are with us, they will receive breakfast and lunch, and they will have access to recess. So that will be part of their daily schedule. One of the things that we wanted to make sure was that we didn't have mass changes across the system in terms of changing bell schedules. So all bell schedules at the elementary schools will remain the same. We currently have schools that start at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and so that time will remain the same so that parents will not have to worry about having to learn a different schedule for their children. One of the things that we heard loud and clear, we didn't want to disrupt those relationships that our teachers have formed with our students since they started school back in September. So this allows us to not have to enact any roster changes at this time, which we feel is very important for our students to make sure that, again, those relationships, that we can keep those intact. The focus is on connectivity. Students will have access to, of course, Wi-Fi in the building, and they will be supervised by staff who will make sure that they are able to connect with the instructor, the teacher that they've had all year. We will just be providing that access by students being able to enter the building to do so. And last but certainly not least, a big part of this is transportation. We knew that was one thing that had prevented many of our students from being able to take part in our connectivity hubs that we offered earlier in the year. So at this point, we are committed to being able to provide normal bus routes for students who meet those transportation requirements. Dr. Shaw?
Good evening. So of course, to bring students in, we certainly have to have staff identified who's going to support the children as they are in the schools. And so to engage in this process, we are looking to support principals in identifying who the essential staff are that will be available to monitor students and assist them in getting on and off the platforms and working with their asynchronous work. We are asking that we identify staff first and foremost who are not responsible for a classroom of students each day. So grade level classroom teachers would not be the ones that we would first go to, unless of course they desire to be in the buildings and want to offer some time. But we're looking at primarily those individuals who do not have a classroom roster. So that could include many different people and who can also assist in leading the work with the principal. And these would be individuals who know a little bit about the different platforms such as Seesaw, Google Classroom that the students have to get on and off. Also have some knowledge base of the technology, as well as those that can help supervise and monitor. So as they continue to work and identify those individuals, they may find that they don't have enough. Some schools may not have enough staff members. And so we are extending invitations with principals to have conversations with us as IIOs to look to see who might be available and where there might be other staff that could be available, to include those that are housed and based out of central office. So including myself, including other resource staff. We have some curriculum-based folks, we have instructional-based folks, as well as those that work in other departments. And of course, all the department leaders have agreed to support this work. As those staff are identified, the Human Resources Department will be providing a letter to the principals to use to provide to those essential staff members, letting them know that we need you to come and back to the building to support this work. Staff, of course, have that opportunity to submit an accommodation request if they haven't up to this point, in case things have changed for them. And those will then continue to be reviewed by Human Resources. Human Resources is also working to identify substitutes that might be interested in coming and supporting the schools and students throughout the school day. And of course, we'll need nurses on site. So we know Elizabeth is working through that process to ensure that we will have nurses to support both the health of staff and students.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders and Dr. Shaw. Next, we're going to have Dr. Troy Pitch, our instructional improvement officers for high schools, give you an update on where we are with our high school reentry.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share the work going on at our schools during this initial reentry phase. High schools have been given the opportunity to focus on our seniors to ensure that we keep them on track to graduate in May. Campuses have moved forward with identifying seniors who are in danger of not graduating based on current course grades and their cumulative credits earned. Students and their families are being contacted by their home campus in order to create individualized plans of recovery where they will attend in-person instruction in areas of need beginning on February 22nd. The amount of in-person time each student will receive is based on the level of support they may need to get back on track. High schools are in the process of identifying staff for this effort, ensuring coverages in the area of instruction for these students without witnessing a disruption to remote learning. As with K-5, we are also working with district support services to coordinate transportation, meals, nursing, custodial services, and ensuring campus plans include health and safety protocols for COVID mitigation. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to Kristen Scott to discuss middle schools.
Good evening, everyone. We wanted to highlight that when we presented last time, there was only a focus on elementary and high school. And with our updates, we want to look at phasing in our middle school students in the same manner in which we're phasing in our elementary students. We are going to ask our essential staff to return on February 22nd. And we are again addressing students with connectivity issues or intermittent connectivity issues, paying close attention to these specific groups of students as highlighted with our elementary counterparts. The phased reentry plan would start on March 1st. You will see that all of the information is very similar to the phased in plan for our elementary. There are certain differences. One of which is our middle school students will not partake in recess. And another point is with our elementary students, they can be grouped in pods of 4 to 5 students. But once we hit middle and high school, our students need to remain 6 feet apart in the classroom spaces. So our principals are currently working on getting the classroom set up. Again, staffing will be those who do not have classroom rosters, just like the elementary school phase-in process.
And then just a reminder, thank you, Chris. This will be a March 1st phased in for students, and then February 22nd would be for our essential staff for that approach. Just wanted to remind the board that we do have mandatory in-person assessments that we are required by federal and state requirements. So state required testing will be conducted on site, as some assessments are required for funding purposes. If the state does not apply for or receive a waiver to eliminate the testing requirement, lower assessment participation rates could result in more schools being placed on improvement and a potential reduction or loss in federal funds. And just a reminder that K-8 buildings and the district receive title funding, and some of these dollars pay for many of the regular education and ESL teacher positions, as well as our ESL and migrant programs that are enabling us to provide these necessary services to our children. And so all of the assessments that you see listed here are in person because they cannot be done remotely. So the KELPA assessment, we have approximately 9,000 ESL students that we will need to determine and schedule coming in to partake in that assessment from February 16th through March 31st. We have ACT assessments that were funded by the state. And so they are strongly recommending that we provide every 11th grader the opportunity to take the paper ACT, which you can see the dates listed there for those assessments, the online ACT work keys, as well as the pre-ACT for all 9th graders. And so those are the schedules that are listed there. We are also listing the CAP summative assessment on this slide as well, as a reminder that we will be taking that in April, and we will be able to provide that services in that hybrid model. So that one we're not as concerned about as trying to find scheduling, but we will need to try to test all students in the hybrid model. Remote students, the state is strongly recommending that we try to do our best to assess our students that are in a remote setting by finding a schedule for them to come in, but we know that some of them may not be able to come in, and so they can work with us to opt out of that assessment, but it does count towards our participation rate. So just wanted to put that out there as well. Just a reminder, testing will be done and plans are being developed to bring those students into our buildings for these assessments. Again, the assessments must be delivered by a certified staff member trained to administer the assessment. All staff may be deemed necessary for this process and essential for this process. So again, HR has a letter template that they're providing to principals to provide to staff members that are needed to administer these assessments. If staff state they cannot return, again, the administrators will guide them to submit the proper accommodation forms to HR. Students will be bused in for a series of full days to complete the assessments as scheduled, and those are students that meet the transportation requirements. And then we are working on providing meals for those students that will be in full day for the assessments. And we're working to be as creative as possible in our scheduling to make this happen. And so next, we know that we're bringing...
Matt.
Oh yes, go on, Dr. Miguel.
Sorry, just a clarification. So like Matt said, we cannot administer those assessments without the adults, and it has to be certified teachers, especially for the KELPA. I want to remind everyone that it has a dual purpose of assessing students so that we will have fresh data as we continue instruction, but it also has the financial aspect that KELPA assessments, we use those numbers also to provide the funding to ESL, and that funding is part of what provides for ESL staff, support staff, translators. So we want to put an emphasis on the need. This is a mandate. This is something we have to do, and we will need staff. I want to emphasize again that schedules will be created for this, so staff will be communicated as those schedules are created. And if anyone has any need for an exception, we encourage them to communicate with HR. We will review the requests, and so they should not feel that that is not present for them. So I encourage people to use that if they so feel.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Miguel.
you.
Sorry, get me back on. So as we begin to bring in staff and students, I know there's a lot of questions on the board's mind as well as our teaching community's minds about vaccinations. And so at this time, I will ask Elizabeth Morris, our Coordinator of Health Services, to give you an update on our vaccinations.
Good evening, Board President Lopez, Madam Vice President, members of the board, Dr. Miguel, and Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools staff. It is my sincere pleasure to bring to you this evening an update on COVID that is one of hope. For a few weeks, we have been anticipating that the state of Kansas would be moving into phase 2 of their vaccine rollout plan towards the end of January. We sent out a staff survey a few weeks ago to gauge their interest, and we received over 2,500 responses from staff who indicated that they were interested in receiving the vaccine as soon as it became available to us. The unified government has been well aware that even though our students are learning remotely, we have never stopped serving our community in person. It is their priority, as well as ours, to get students back into the classroom as soon as possible. As you have probably heard, vaccine distribution across the nation has had a much slower rollout than we had all hoped for. While the Wyandotte County Health Department is ready and has the capacity to vaccinate 5,000 people each week, they received less than 1,000 doses last week. On Thursday of last week, we received the wonderful news that the health department had 400 doses available to begin vaccinating our staff this week. Then over the weekend, we received even better news that we could expand that to include about 1,000. Several department leaders came together on Friday to discuss how to begin scheduling employees, and we felt that employees who are in direct face-to-face contact with students, staff, and the community should be given the first priority. With yesterday being a staff in-service and grade prep day, and today marking the beginning of the third quarter, we were still able to send 250 individuals to receive their first dose. Those 250 staff members represent special education, ESL migrant, custodians, transportation, nutritional services, our tradesmen, athletic coaches, and substitute teachers, to name a few. This vaccine is going to be available to all district employees, contractual staff, interns, and temporary workers. I do want to make sure that everyone knows that the COVID vaccine is entirely voluntary. It is not required, it is not mandatory to be taken. There is no cost to receive the vaccine, and all employees will be granted time off from work in order to receive their vaccinations. And the best benefit is that employees who have received 2 doses of vaccine will not be required to quarantine anymore if they are exposed to someone who is diagnosed with COVID-19. And this next slide shows you a little bit of the fun and excitement that took place at the health department yesterday and today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Morris, for your dedication and all your hard work to get this vaccination information to us. I know that it has not been easy, and you were working so hard to work with the Wyandotte County Health Department to get this necessary vaccine for our staff here in KCKPS. So thank you so much for that. We know that there are some questions from the board regarding the mask mandate for our staff. And so I'm going to ask that Ms. Kelly Tushman, Chief of HR, talk about the mask and social distancing protocols that we are putting in place for our staff. So Ms. Tushman.
Good evening, Board, President Lopez, Vice President Page, and Dr. Miguel. Just want to go real quickly through, I know part of what we've been thinking about is as we return to in-person, now we need to think more about the mask mandate and also social distancing. So we have put together in HR some information about how we might do that. Thank you, Max. So in accordance, the first thing we have here is just what the mask mandate is, that in any public space, indoor or outdoor, any district property, you must wear a mask. Obviously, exceptions include if you're in an enclosed workspace, such as an office or a classroom, you do not need to wear your mask in those spaces, but when you leave, you need to put them back on. Doesn't include cubicles. And then, of course, it needs to go above the, with a nose and mouth and not more, below the nose. And yes, and even when we get the COVID vaccine, we also have to continue to wear the mask, and that's a very important part of this as well. And then also the social distancing protocol. So again, we want to remind everyone, we've been remote for a while, so we haven't had to think about some of the social distancing or physical distancing, but we are to remain 6 feet of space between ourselves and other people. And that includes, staff meetings, elevators, bathrooms, office spaces. You can read that. But basically, we're, again, reminding people that we are not wanting them to congregate and that we are having virtual meetings still throughout this phase. So Matt, if you can go down to the next page. So the disciplinary actions. So that's the question of how do we enforce this? So we will follow a progressive discipline process. And so the first offense, of course, we will just ask people to please adhere to our policies, or not policies, but to our protocol. Most of the time, that's all it's going to be necessary. And we will just document that we've had that conversation. Second time, we're going, and in any case, if somebody does not wear their mask, we will not have them in our buildings because it is required to wear your mask. So the second offense is a written warning, and an employee is placed on administrative leave without pay for the remainder of the shift. And this is really for the person who, and I do not anticipate that we will run into this issue, but if somebody refuses to wear a mask, then they will be sent home. And we will tell them that they have to return wearing their mask. And then the third offense is suspension without pay for 1 week. And then the fourth offense, of course, is termination. So the behavior that we're not considering disciplinary in nature, I just want to make sure we know this. Obviously, if we just ask someone to wear the mask correctly, then and they do that, that's not a problem. If you ask someone not to congregate and they adhere to your request, that's not a problem. And if they have an approved medical reason for not wearing the mask, they still can't be in the building, but then we will work with them on whatever accommodation we can make. So that's the mask and social distancing protocols. And we do have a form that we will give to supervisors so they can fill this out and provide that to human resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tushman. We know that there are still some wonderings about what are we doing in the buildings. So our buildings are ready for students and staff return. So next I'm going to have Lenora Miller, our Executive Director of Operations, just come and talk to you and show you some photos of what we're doing in our buildings to prepare for our students. Ms. Miller?
Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Matt. Tonight, I'm just going to bring some examples to you so that you have a visual of what's happening with our facilities and our district employees that are working very hard to get environments absolutely secured and ready and healthy for employees to return to buildings and also to welcome our students back to our buildings. So this is an example of an entryway at Noble Prentice. They're set up with their thermal temperature scanner, like all other buildings. And then you could see their front desk area has what we call transactional desk shields on them for additional mitigation risk. Here is a nice picture of our Noble Prentice elementary desks with shields on them already installed and appropriately spaced as per the guidelines. We are gearing up to make all the final preparations to make sure we are absolutely at 100%. So that was a very good job at Noble Prentice. And then McKinley, shout out to your staff and our facilities teams. Here is the entrance at the front of the building, and then also the office area example. And then New Chelsea, shout out to that team. They've got their desk shields ready, and we've overcome some of the challenges. As you can see, not all desks are alike, so we've had to get a little bit creative there. And then finally, we have Gloria Willis, who, as an example, we have those COVID-19 signs that's been posted at all the entrances at each building to help people understand whether or not they should enter the building and what should they do if they have some of those symptoms. And then finally, Gloria Willis, a nice picture there. Good shout out to that team. Gloria Willis entry into the transactional areas. And this is a really cool example of some of the creativity that our teams and school leaders have come up with. So in support of each other, we've got directional signage so we can promote some behavior. You'll see on the left is a hallway with arrows and a divider sign on which side of the traffic lane to stay in as a pedestrian. And then the up down on the stairwells, and some of the schools also have up only stairwells and down only stairwells. I'm not sure if that's my next slide or not.
Nope, I think that's all of the photos. No, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Ms. Miller. At this point, we know there's been a lot of information, and so we're going to open it up for any questions that you may have.
Matt, I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
How are you addressing the early childhood?
I'm going to let Dr. Kimberly Shaw share some of the things around early childhood and bringing them back.
I'm Ms. Humphreys. With early childhood, we are still working to navigate some of the various expectations. Number one, having 2 classes in a day that we would then have to be ensuring risk mitigations in between sessions, as well as staffing and just different programmatic expectations. So Head Start has some very specific expectations around transportation. So we're working through that process. And what's really going to help us is the parent intention or the survey that they completed with their intent as to whether their child is going to be remote or hybrid. And so as we continue to move forward with elementary and some of the other grade levels, we're going to be able to continue to spend time working through all the different programmatic expectations that are required at early childhood. So we haven't forgotten about them. They do all have devices with internet built in. And so the majority of our families we have very few at early childhood that are reporting that they can't connect. But of course, as you know, it does require parents to be a part of that. A 3- and 4-year-old certainly cannot just turn on a computer and get on a platform and read and know what to do and find that link. So it is dependent upon parents to be there to support them. But at this point in time, we feel we need a little bit more time to work through some of the additional risk mitigations and requirements for childcare licensing and Head Start that fall into play with our early childhood programs.
So
but we'll be ready to go by April 5th.
So it's still very much a work in progress then.
Yes, very much.
So, okay. my other question, Matt, is when we met with the health department back on January the 8th, they mentioned the K95 masks for teachers.
Yes, those were, according to the guidance, those are strongly recommended. However, they're saying, and I'm going to I'll let Elizabeth speak too and make sure that I'm saying the right thing. But that was a strong recommendation. However, it wasn't absolutely necessary. And I think it was a double, I'll let Elizabeth speak to this.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're on the right track, Matt.
Oh, good.
I don't have the exact language in front of me, but it does say something to the effect of a KN95 or N95 mask is strongly recommended. They are able to provide additional filtration and a better fit on the face than the other masks do, but that was a recommendation if possible. But the requirement for all staff is either a multi-layer cloth mask or a surgical paper style mask. They did have some specifics about what kind of masks they did not want anyone to wear. They didn't want us to wear a face shield alone. They didn't want us to use a gaiter, which is the stretchy one that sort of looks like a tube scarf that gets pulled up, or just anything that was single layer. So those are the ones we can't use. And like Matt said, the N95 or KN95 is a strong recommendation. There is a little bit of a difference though for our students that are in the high needs classrooms, because we know that some of those students are going to be either medically exempt from wearing a mask, or they might have developmental delays or sensory reasons why they can't tolerate a mask. Part of our health and safety plan for those students alone is that they did want our staff in those classrooms to wear the higher quality of a mask, or so an N95 mask for them, and that would just provide extra protection to the staff and the students in the classroom.
Well, I had seen more in the news recently where in Europe and other places they're requiring them to wear the surgical or the N95 masks for better filtration. I did not know if we were leaning towards that with our staff or if we were still on the fabric disposable masks. The other question I have for you, Elizabeth, is we're asking a lot more of our nursing staff, our school nursing staff, than we ever have before. And I know we have supposed to be having more federal funding coming down. Are we providing enough training and personnel to support our nursing staff in our schools? With that federal funding, would it help our nurses to complete all these tasks we're asking of them, to provide them with CNAs or medical assistants to help them? Is that something that we need to look into? Because there is a lot we're asking of them to do now.
I think you're absolutely right, Janie. I think that would be a huge support to our nursing staff. We've taken on contact tracing, and a single case of exposure can take literally hours to complete the conversation with the person who has tested positive, get a list of all their close contacts, and then make those phone calls to them, and then document everything, and then let HR know, and then monitor them before they're able to return to work. So I think you're spot on, Janie. That would be so much support to our staff.
And some of our schools, we've got more than 500 kids in them. And if we're looking at, I know that's something that, and hopefully in the long run, we're not going to need, but they talk about the medical professionals in the hospitals and the doctor's offices being worn out and exhausted. And I'm thinking of our school nurses and what all we're asking you guys to do. I didn't know that if that was something that we might want to look into, Dr. Miguel, as hopefully this funding comes through, as something that would help us be more efficient and serve our staff better, if we could look into something like that.
And I will say that the National Association of School Nurses also has some recommendations about how many nurses to student, what the nurse to student ratio should be within a classroom. And some of our larger schools, just pre-COVID, really could benefit from having another licensed medical personnel in the building.
So,
I would absolutely welcome those discussions.
and one more question, then I'll let somebody else ask questions. Are you expecting any new guidelines coming down from the new administration in Washington in the next few weeks on how we handle school reentry and COVID protocols from the CDC?
I suspect that we will have some new guidance, but I will tell you, the Wyandotte County Health Department has been on top of things, and they stand alone as an example, not just in the area, but in the state, for what they've done with tracing, the vaccination site that they've set up, and their leadership in schools, honestly. So I think they don't necessarily need to know what a new administration thinks they should do, because they are above and beyond.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Wanda Brownlee Page, and since Ms. Morris is on, I have a few questions, and I want to start one. We didn't have, according to what you told us, we were short 7 nurses. Have those positions been filled? You said it couldn't be an LPN. You didn't hire first-year nurses. There's a shortage of nurses. So my question to you is, did you go to the nursing agencies that would provide subs? And do we have those 7 positions ready? Because in the reentry plan, it said they would be there on site. So do we have those sub nurses in? Because it's hard to talk about getting a nurse that's a CNA, and we don't have all the nursing positions filled at this time. So do we have the sub nurses ready in place and ready to go?
We do not have those positions filled either within a district employee or an agency nurse at this time, but HR and several of us are in discussions on with some ways to solve that, some things that we will be hopefully bringing to you for discussion, hopefully at the next board meeting.
Because I hope we're not doing, because I worked in the district for 30 years. I don't think it's fair to have secretaries doing that. And we have nurses. We may not have those who've been doing it. It's funny, we can hire a first-year teacher, but we can't hire a first-year nurse. That's just my opinion. Second, the scanners, do they work? The temperature gauges. That was an issue before. Some of them work, some of them weren't in place. Are you aware, have you checked every school to see if they work?
I will say I'm not the person that probably can best answer that question. I think Doug would probably.
If you would like me to jump in, Elizabeth, I'm sorry. This is Doug Clements, Director of Physical Properties. Good evening, everybody. I'll tell you that we have the supplier for those units. They came out earlier a couple weeks ago, and they're supposed to be back out this next week to go through all those and make sure that they're all in operating condition. It's not done yet, but it's in process.
Okay, and then in terms of the buses, and I don't know if she would answer that, or I got to get somebody else to answer that. Or are they taking, I saw where it said in the reentry plan, they wouldn't take the temperature on the bus. Is that what we're doing? Because before they were going to take the temperatures on the buses.
So I want to just add a little bit to what Doug said about the thermometers at the school buildings. So in addition to those temperature tablets, every school will have multiple handheld no-touch thermometers. We know that just that one tablet or even 2 tablets at an entrance might not be enough to facilitate getting all the students through without having congregation as they come through the door. So we are planning to have multiple people on hand able to check temperatures as children enter the building. And then if the tablet were to fail or not, if the temperature outside makes it not work or read correctly, we do have that ability to do a check with the handheld. As far as the temperatures on the bus, we had talked a lot about it over the summer when we were planning for students to come back. And it was felt that it wouldn't be necessarily a good use of time to check temperatures of students as they boarded the bus. Because if we have a student who does show that they have an elevated temperature, we're not going to leave them at the bus stop. We're going to bring them on the bus anyway, have them be checked by a nurse, make sure that that's a real fever, and not, again, maybe something due to the temperature, or if they have a coat on and they're hot, for whatever reason, that's not considered an accurate measurement of core body temperature. So we would want to bring them to the school, have them checked out, and then make that decision there. We would not leave, especially a sick child, at a bus stop or turn them away.
Well, I hope we wouldn't. And you said you all were going to get together and work on how we're going to choose the nurse. And if we're saying people are coming back in on the 16th, when does this take place?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood your question.
You made the statement earlier that you, along with Ms. Tushman, if I heard you correctly, that you all would be meeting, trying to decide what you were going to do about those vacancies for nurses. Do you have a date in mind? Because if they're talking about bringing people in on the 16th, we need to make sure all those schools have someone. So when does that happen? And the 1st is next Monday.
Yeah, we are working with that agency and in communication with them on a daily basis to get staffing, and they know that we have these needs. I will say, all of our staff well, I shouldn't say all of our staff, but many of our staff are CPR or first aid trained. And so for the small, minor issues, we would not want a secretary to feel the weight of, managing something that was a serious situation. But of course, they could easily assist us with some of those minor first aid needs.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about accommodations. We had told our teachers that they could put in for accommodation, and then in the reentry plan, we're saying you got to come in and then we will look at your, and to me, that's unfair. We're asking people to come and to work, and we do have a dedicated staff, and for us to say, come in, and then we'll look at what you need. And then people have some critical issues, and I thought they had turned that stuff in earlier, but it wasn't addressed. So that's not fair to them.
That's not what, Ms. Page, that's not what we're saying. So I want to make sure we're clear.
Well, it said in the reentry plan, you had to come in and then they would evaluate. And to me, that's not fair to ask them to come in.
I don't know what I didn't.
Go back and look at the reentry plan. That's what it said.
Okay. Well, what we're doing with accommodations, just so you know, yes, we did have people give us accommodation requests all the way back to August, September, November. And so far, we haven't had to use many of those requests because we haven't been back to in-person school. Now we're going to be asking a different group of people, not necessarily teachers, right, to come back and help us with the connectivity hubs. So that will potentially, it will probably trigger other people to now make requests. And we are dealing with the request based on when we're re-entering. So we'll be dealing with the February 22nd date first and making those accommodations. And so we do have a process for how we're doing that, but we have been doing this all along. We've been working with SPED as they've brought teachers back. We've been working with them and other situations that we have, and nurses, the same thing. So that's the process, and we'll continue that process.
But I guess let me clarify then. We will ask staff, they will receive communication letting them know that they have been identified to come in. And at that point, if anyone needs an accommodation, that's when we are asking them to submit the request for accommodation. We're not asking them to come in and then request the accommodation. So I want to clarify in case that was miscommunicated.
Plan, it did say you had to come in and then assess. So you're telling me that what was written is not correct. Am I hearing you correct?
If that is what it said, it's not correct. Are you referring to the presentation today, Ms. Page?
No, what I got in your Friday notes.
If it said that, if it said that they have to come in, let me correct that. That would be incorrect. when they receive communication, then they can request an accommodation.
Because what it's
Thank you.
in the plan was different, but you're
Okay.
saying disregard that. That's not what it is.
Yeah, so it sounds like, just for clarity for everybody listening, no one is going to be expected to come in and then request an accommodation. If there's an accommodation request, that should be made prior to you reporting to your building, and HR will review it. So if there was a misprint in something in writing, the clarity is there is no one is expected to come into a building and then submit your accommodation. That will be looked at prior to. So just want to be clear so that everybody watching is all on the same page. Thank you.
And the reason I asked that is that's what it said. So I just want clarity. Plus, if you already have them, a lot of them already pre-submitted them, do they have to resubmit it again if you already have it?
Well, I am sure a lot of them will recontact us based on the information. When we send out the letter, I'm sure a lot of them will recontact us just to make sure again that we have it. But yes, it's just going to be a simple matter of revalidating what they have already submitted. And then it is a pretty easy process. The thing that makes it difficult is not knowing when we're asking people to for sure come to in person. And so now we have some certainty around that with the February 22nd date with a group of employees. So it'll be a much easier process.
Okay, and then I want to ask Ms. Morris another question. If she has that data, I went to the health department's page and I saw the positivity rate. One said 44%, another one said 27%. Would you happen to have that data?
I have not taken a look at the data today, so I'm not sure which graph that you're referring to. That might be, I don't know if that's the daily by date each day. So there may be a day that they had a higher percent positive. I do know they said this morning that the percent positivity is trending down and we're sitting around 28% positive. So they're cautiously hopeful that we're stabilizing. It's still very high. But that we're getting to a better place than we were a few weeks back.
And I'll jump in real quick, Ms. Morris. Yeah, 27 or 28% is what I heard on the call with the health department this morning.
For the 7-day rolling.
And correct. And part of that is because the number of tests being provided is a lot smaller than what they would like to see. So they have a smaller testing, smaller size of testing population, which then they figure contribute to that being because more of the symptomatic folks are going to get tested. And so they think that's part of the reason that the number is as high as it is or as high as it was. But that is part of it. But to your point, Ms. Morris, Ms. Page, that number is still way too high than what we want to see it. So I'm gonna let some other folks answer or make some questions. It looked like Ms. Clark had a question. I saw you leaning in, Ms. Clark. So I want to make sure other board members have an opportunity. Dr. Nguyen, I see you as well. If you have a question, I just want to make sure all board members have an opportunity to ask questions, given the time that we have. Ms. Clark.
My question is really around stats, and I'm sure we've done our math here. I'm just curious about how many students are we saying that we're bringing back in? We've talked a lot about the plan, but not necessarily around the stats around the plan and how many kids are truly impacted. And whether you have that or not, I don't know.
Because we're making a little bit of an adjustment, we're still focusing on around that 1,800 mark, but I will ask the IIOs. I know that they've been working with principals to identify those students, continue to identify, and they've been documenting that. So they may have some more up-to-date numbers, but there might be a little bit of a difference based on what we said last time, just because of this updated version.
Okay, and so Mr. Anderson, is the criteria, is it set for every school? I'm curious about the standards. So is every school following the same criteria? Here's some very high level, and I'm fine with the high level, but as you start moving down in the weeds of things, is the criteria for every student the same? And
our goal is that this criteria is the same. And so what you see in that guidance document is what every building has received for the guidance around which students we are targeting. Dr. Miguel, did you want to share more? It looked like you were.
Yes, thank you, Matt. I wanted to share what we shared with principals is to identify those students who, as of December 18th, I believe was the date, Matt, have demonstrated either no connectivity or very unreliable connectivity for whatever reason. The unreliable part, for whatever reason they are not connecting, those are the students that we are identifying. So the numbers will vary greatly from school to school, just because of location of the school in some cases. We are collecting those numbers. So we will be able to report once they finish contacting students. Remember also that we are contacting students and the parent may still say, I understand, but my child is not coming. So it doesn't mean that every student identified will be coming in. So once we have those term numbers, we will continue updating the board and bringing those numbers in.
And then my only other question is around the connectivity hubs. So I hear connectivity hubs, and I'm trying to take my imagination away from this. I understand we'll have staff there as well. If I put a visual behind this, we have students. The students are set up in their own seats. They're logging into the platforms, and they're doing as if our students are doing that are at home. They're participating in that exact same manner. Really, it's more of just providing them a place to be able to go that is stable.
Correct. And then they would get their breakfast, lunch, and then they get a designated recess. And then there's someone there to kind of support them if they're having technical issues along the way.
Okay. Thank you. I know I asked questions that you answered. I just wanted to make sure I 100% understood.
No,
you're totally fine, Ms. Clark. Thank you.
Yeah, no apology needed.
Thank you. Dr. Nguyen, I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to ask questions if you do have.
Thank you and good evening. 2 questions. One, excuse me, Matt, did I understand, and please explain, did you say some remote students can opt out of being tested, taking the state assessments?
Yes, and I have Ben Price, Dr. Price on here too. He can give a little more information, as well as Lisa Walker. They're part of I'll say CAC, which I don't remember what exactly that acronym stands for, but they are in weekly or monthly communication with the state. So I'm going to let them talk about what are the options for our remote students as it relates to the state assessment. So Ben or Lisa, would you be able to speak?
Sure, I'll talk about some of the reporting sides insofar as we have a code that we can apply when we do some state reporting for testing statistics and such for students who, for one reason or another, couldn't be on site due to COVID. So the accounting can be taken care of by a code when I do some state reporting at the end of the year.
So Ben,
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that as allowing the student to say, I opt out of taking a state assessment. I mean, technically, if all of our students are remote, then we could have 22,000 nobody taking state assessments, right?
I think that there would have to be, it would have to be family driven. So I know in the past, it's my understanding too, that families could always submit a letter opting children out for state assessments. I know I've seen a couple of examples of some school districts that have posted a form letter detailing the fact that you as a family can opt your child out of this assessment.
Now, is that just because of COVID, or that's been the rule all along?
I can help with that, Mr. Price. Dr. Nguyen, that's a great question. There is a provision made at the state level for any parent that wants to opt their student out of state testing, and that preceded COVID. The state does anticipate there could be more opt-out for some parents who want to do fully remote and are concerned about sending their child in for any reason. So they've given us a special code this year that we will code for students who are opting out because of COVID. That number, of course, we have a concern about the participation rate, right? Because we know that we're required to have a certain participation rate of students taking the test. And so we're strongly encouraging everyone to take the test. We want that data to see how students are doing. But it is an option that is provided this year, especially because of COVID.
Okay. And then for whomever, since the staff are taking the vaccine now, the second one will be giving, what, 21, 28 days from now? If there are those bouts of illness, have we prepared, I guess, Ms. Tishman, for substitutes to cover those classes? Is that going to coincide with the time that we are going to be bringing more students in? Have we thought about those scenarios, those worst case scenarios?
Yeah, probably Elizabeth might be able to address some of that, because I'm thinking that the vaccines are going to be probably what, Elizabeth, most of February, I'm assuming, and the next 21 days would be then March. So we should have most of these vaccinations handled by the time we get back to the hybrid April 5th timeframe. So I'm assuming that we're going to have a lot of that out of the way. But if in fact we do have a scenario, yes, we would be working on how we might then handle those situations, since we will have more scaled back teaching staff or staff in the building. It should be something we could manage other ways. I don't, like I said, I don't know.
No, I know you're gonna have to manage it, because you're gonna have to manage it. I was just saying, have you prepared for it thought-wise of what in case that scenario occurs? Do you have a plan? That's the question.
I would say I don't have a plan exactly, but thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's a great question.
Okay, thank you. And just one last comment, and Dr. Miguel knows what I'm speaking of and why I ask about the test state assessments. The current conversation going on in the legislature deals with test results, and that there were no state assessments given last year, so that these students, you're tested on data that you have not had for some, but that if, I guess it's just a matter of numbers, if the participation rate goes up, how does that then fit with our then a total results, total data results? I mean, is it going to be based on the numbers that take it, the numbers of enrolled students?
You mean the 95% participation? Is that what you're asking?
No, the results that all third graders came in at a level X compared to 4, or all second graders.
I think you make a good point, Dr. Nguyen, which is why we're encouraging all of our students to take the test. We want that data. We know it's important. We'll be evaluated based on, first, our participation rate. We have to have a certain number that is required.
And that so is what?
I don't know.
You said?
I don't know that number. We'd have to get that to you, and we can send it for sure. But that would be the first evaluation metric. And then the second one would be, of course, the percentage of students that are reflecting proficiency at certain levels, so we would need to take into consideration, if we have a smaller group of students testing and we have an increase in the number of students performing well, we would have to consider that, right? Because it wouldn't be our representative of our total population. So we've got to look at both numerator and denominator, and we're clear that the state is looking at that as well. So thank you for flagging that for us.
And I did ask at the last superintendent's meeting with Commissioner Watson, I did ask how the results were going to be used. And they were very clear and very honest. They do not know yet. All they know right now is we have to have students take the test, but they haven't said how the results are going to be used, because they know what's happening, and it's throughout the country and the state. It's not just us.
Right.
So I will keep you posted as we hear more guidance.
Well, you know, I hear the other chatter. So I can tell you what is being said in committee. So all you got to do is tune in and you can hear it loud and clear. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyen. Thank you, board members. I do just want to do a quick time check. I know we've been on this topic for an hour now. I do want to respect questions that come in because I know this is a very important topic for our staff, for us, for our community. So I appreciate all the thoughtful conversation, discussion, questions. I would ask if you have additional questions or clarity that's needed, please reach out to Dr. Miguel and then she can contact the appropriate staff persons to make sure that we answer your questions. But I really do appreciate the thoughtful conversation. And there's no action needed. This was informational. They'll continue to bring information at every meeting. So again, I appreciate all the staff that updated us today and for the thoughtful questions.
And please send us the questions because just like Ms. Kelly said, you know, when you ask us a question about something we haven't thought, it just helps us plan better. So all questions and comments are welcome.
Can I just say one more thing? I know who we contact if we have questions. Who does our public contact? Who our parents contact if they have questions? I want to make sure that we start giving and providing that communication, because sometimes I think things are misdirected. And so it feels like the ball's been dropped and the ball wasn't dropped. Maybe you didn't get it to the right person. So for our parents, teachers and staff listening, who do you want them to contact with their concerns?
So we always ask that their first point of contact be their principal. And the principal most likely or hopefully will have the information. But if they don't have the information, they know who to call, which would be either the IIO, Matt, or myself. But then they also have that contact information for the parent or the teacher that they can get right back to them. So ideally, your point of contact is always your principal.
And thank you, Dr.
They can always, I'm not going to say what I was going to say because we want them to contact their principal. Please do that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just want that to be out there. And we might need to say that more and more as we keep touching sticky situations to make sure parents and staff and everyone else knows who they should be contacting.
Thank you so much for that.
That's great. Thank you, Ms. Clark.